Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to bring you my most anticipated releases of April 2015. So April's going to be a pretty good month for releases, for which I'm very excited. Most of them are not going to be coming out until the very end of the month though, so I got a ways to wait. First is the release of A Desperate Fortune by Susanna Kersley. I have mentioned Miss Kersley here on my channel before and how much I really enjoy her books, and I have actually already read A Desperate Fortune. I read an arc of it thanks to NetGalley, and it's up there, I think, in terms of probably in the top 3 Kersley novels I read. I really enjoyed it. I loved the main character in the present day. I thought she was very engaging, and the character from the past was just as engaging. There was just something about being able to care about both parallel running stories that made A Desperate Fortune for me so good. Next on April 7th is Scandal by Lindsay Smith. This is the sequel to Secret, which I read at the tail end at some point of last year. It is a young adult historical fiction fantasy novel with the idea that there were children living in the USSR who had some sort of preternatural ability, and so the KGB would recruit them. There's a really good element of historical and political intrigue because it is set during the Cold War, and at the same time you get kind of fun, almost X-Men style fantasy science fiction elements of people with extra powers. And so yes, this is the sequel. I believe it is only going to be a duology, so that'll be kind of nice to get the ending of the story, and I'm curious to see how it wraps up. And April 8th will be Zero Boxer by Fonda Lee. I'm a little intrigued by this novel because it's just kind of the idea. It looks like sort of boxing in space, which I just went, that could be fun. I wouldn't go into that novel looking for high lit. I would go in just for fun and to see the science fiction world building that would go on. But that's really all I know about this book. On April 14th, Dream a Little Dream by Kirsten Gear will release. I have also already read this book very recently. I read my arc from NetGalley, and I quite enjoyed this book. I rated it a 4 out of 5. I'm interested to see where the rest of the trilogy goes, and I think it's a huge step up from Miss Gear's Precious Gems trilogy, for which she's best known, and which I was not a huge fan. Also on the 14th, Happy Again, an e-novella by Jennifer E. Smith will release. This is an e-novella sequel to This Is What Happy Looks Like, which I really enjoyed by her, and I like the idea of getting a sequel just to be able to see where these characters ended up, and knowing that, a relationship that started online and kind of only lasts over the summer, it's gonna drift apart, but will they come back together again? I don't know. It looks cute. I want to read it just for some happy fluffy feels. On April 21st, The Death Code by Lindsay Cummings released. This is the sequel to her novel The Murder Complex. I liked The Murder Complex. I didn't quite love it. I think it's really clear this could have just been a novel for adults and been far more graphic. Not to say graphic for the sake of graphic, but this was a world in which I expected there to be more graphic violence and gore, and I was really surprised by how tame a lot of it was. And I think that has to do with the fact that it came out for a YA audience as opposed to an adult audience. Whatever the case, I would like to see what happens in the sequel to Death Code, so that's a pretty exciting release. Also on the 21st is the release of Challenger Deep by Neil Shusterman. Now, if I'm remembering this book correctly, it has something to do with deep sea diving and exploration and I think submarines. I could be totally wrong on that point, but whatever the case, I love the idea of traveling our world and kind of exploring its literal depths, so I'm quite excited to see this book. I've actually really never read a Neil Shusterman novel. I never read any of the Unwind dystology, so this could be my first one that I read. Finally, April 28th, I've got 4 books that come out on April 28th, which I'm super excited, and 2 of which I've already pre-ordered. First is Rook by Sharon Cameron. This looks like it's a futuristic kind of dystopian that's taking place in Paris, and it says it's harkening back to the French Revolution, and basically that the upper crust is getting, guillotined, they're losing their heads, but somebody's saving them, and I'm going, this sounds like somebody is doing a kind of dystopian, almost post-apocalyptic, futuristic Scarlet Pimpernel. The Scarlet Pimpernel is, of course, one of my favorite classics of all time. I love that book, and so anytime somebody's gonna play with it, I want to know. This is what I've gotten from the blurb, so I could be totally wrong as to what this book is about, but needless to say, if it is that, I'm in 100%. I want to read it. Next is Encore to an Empty Room by Kevin Emerson. This is the sequel to his book Exile, which I read this past year and which Mr. Emerson actually sent me a signed copy. Thank you again, Mr. Emerson. It was awesome because I participated in an event he did on Twitter where we were to offer him some of our favorite birthday advice. Exile, I knew was going to be part of a trilogy, so when I saw Encore to an Empty Room was coming out this month, I got really excited. It's a really great YA contemporary dealing with rock bands. It's really fun. If you didn't read Exile, go read it so you can go read Encore to an Empty Room. These final two are perhaps the two I am most anticipating this month, and I have actually already pre-ordered both of them. First is Magonia by Maria Devana Headley. I really hope I said that right. From what I've gathered of Magonia, it's been pitched as if Stardust by Neil Gaiman, Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor, and Some of the Fault in Our Stars by John Green had a book baby. And I'm going, that could be really interesting. It's a fantasy novel that takes place in our world where the young female protagonist has like lung issues, she cannot breathe, and then somehow she manages to find herself in this different world called Magonia. And in Magonia, she not only can breathe, but seems to have these kind of powers. But she finds out Magonia is planning to basically invade and destroy Earth. So now she has to make this choice of, do I live in this fantasy world where I can breathe and almost be a superhero, but at the cost of everyone I know and love? Literally, because, you know, they'll be enslaved, destroyed, whatever. It's like, or do I fight Magonia and go back to this world where I'm basically dead woman walking? Kind of a cool idea. I hope it's really good. It has a gorgeous cover. I'm really looking forward to this book. And finally, I know I'm not the only one anticipating this book, and some people have arcs. Word up, I'm super jealous of all you people who have arcs. Is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is a standalone YA fantasy novel that is taking place in a kind of ancient Rome. Yeah, all I heard was fantasy and ancient Rome, and I was like, sign me up. We all know I love ancient Rome. We all know I love fantasy. I'm in. And the idea of it being a standalone to me is intriguing. It's so nice to see that those still exist in YA. But yes, those are all the books I personally am most anticipating in April. And so that's it from me today, you guys. And so until next time, cheers.